All right, world. Hopefully this is working right. What's up? It's Noah here. I know it's late. It's like 11:10 here in California. But I wanted to come to you live for another awesome video. Today we're going to be talking about whether film school was worth it. I went to film school about 7 years ago, so it's been a little bit of time. And so I spent $24,000, 3 years of my life attending school, right? And so that's the age-old question that I'm asking today. And it's been debated on the internet. It's been talked about a bunch. But I kind of wanted to throw my hat in the ring and tell you what my perspective was on going to film school and whether it's worth it to you. Maybe that's something that you're considering in the future. But yeah, that's something that I did and I spent money on and I was a part of. And so today's a little different. Hopefully I finally figured out all the camera settings and the audio settings. If you haven't been following, I've been trying to post more frequently on this YouTube channel, but also today I am going live out to Facebook. So I have both the Facebook stream and the YouTube stream happening at the same time. So hopefully I won't be losing my mind trying to monitor both. But yeah, that's what we're doing right now. Sweet. I can see on my Facebook page that I am live. So that looks good. Awesome. And YouTube's up too. And life's good. Life's good. So I see this weird thing in the corner. Oh, the screen switched back. Since I, have OCD about this kind of stuff, let me try to see if I can fix this camera. But okay, so while I'm fixing this camera, let me get to my first point here so I can keep the ball moving. Film school, yes. So I have kind of a mixed feelings towards film school, and generally though, 9 times out of 10, if you have the choice to go to college, fundamentally, I think today, obviously, there's a lot of controversy around that topic, and a lot of people kind of figuring out whether they want to spend the time and effort and money. And so it's kind of this the younger generation, my generation's mentality, even younger than me, they have a kind of a stigma against going to college, right? And they think it's not worth it. They think the time and energy spent to get that degree is no longer viable to them, right? And so in some sense, I understand that, and I've felt that at times. But the reality is, I still think there are some great... sorry, I switched the resolution on the camera. I think there are some great reasons why I would encourage you to go to film school. And so we're going to be talking about that. I shouldn't have pressed that button. We're going to be talking about that in this video. So the first one is, think of yourself, if you aren't there already, as the 18 to 24-year-old demographic, right? So what are some stereotypes? What are some truths about that age group, right? So generally speaking, and I know I'm going to step on somebody's toes and piss somebody off here, but generally when you're 18 to 24 years old, you're still maturing, right? It's the first couple years of your adult life. And you're not going to have everything perfect. You're not going to be great at everything you do, even though sometimes you think you are. And so that when you enter the workforce as an 18-year-old, you're going to have a little bit different mindset than you will as you mature, as you get older, as you get a little bit more experience. And so I think that kind of delayed entry to the workforce, to the film industry, can be beneficial to you. I'm not saying it's a must, but I think that's one of the things that I think can definitely help you out, is kind of taking that time to learn and to practice making mistakes in a classroom environment. Excuse me. Instead of making those mistakes, getting paid and working for somebody else. I would also strongly advise not just getting a film degree, but consider getting a business degree, or at least a business minor. That was something my dad suggested to me, for me to do. And looking back, he was definitely right. I wish I would have been more forward thinking in that sense, because now I do own a business, and there are tax things and business things and protocols and stuff I wish I would have learned about back in college. But what I learned about was filmmaking. And so that was good that I had classes and things revolving around the filmmaking process. But honestly, the saying's true that you're going to learn just as much in the real world in the first 3 months than I did in the 3 years that I was in film school. Now, I will say kind of two things that are a little bit different about my history compared to a lot of other people is I did spend 3 years total in film school instead of 4. I was lucky enough to have a dual enrollment program when I was in high school, which allowed me to take college classes. I was actually supposed to get an associate's degree in engineering until I realized engineering wasn't my thing before I even graduated high school, right? So it was the dual enrollment program where I was doing both high school and college at the same time. And so I got 34 credits or so from that. And so after my first semester at the University of North Texas, my alma mater, I was considered a sophomore. And by the end of the second semester, let's see, that would make me a junior. Yeah. So, just making sure the numbers added up in my head. So, yeah, that would be something if I was to look back and encourage myself in, I definitely would have, spent a little bit more time, thinking through my degree. I really enjoyed film school and I really loved that I was able to learn and go through that process. But, I wish I would have taken my dad's advice on that. And so, yeah, the next point about going to film school, is networking. And so when you're in a room, when you're in an environment where there's tens, if not hundreds of people that have the same goal as you, the same similar mindset as you, it's going to be beneficial, right? And so that's the networking phase. And when you're around a bunch of people, and you guys are moving towards the same goals, it's really, really cool because you can kind of have that camaraderie, right? That team aspect, the togetherness that comes with film school. And so even till today, I still have people that I have that camaraderie with, that I work with on a regular basis, or at least try to. And so that's one of the powerful things about film school that you won't necessarily get if you just jump into the industry right away, right? Another thing that's really good about being in college and being at that age is that if you or when you make those mistakes, right, when you get those reps in and you're spending your time and energy on a project, if you mess up on a college project, generally speaking, it's a lot less costly than if you're doing it in the real world, right? So your crew, the people that you're working on that project with, they're not going to be paid, right? So they're paying to go to school, right? So you might have a dozen, you might have 20, 30 people on a project. In the real world, in television and film, at least from my experience out here in Hollywood, the 7 years I've been here, your crews range from like 20 to 150, depending on the size of the show. And so everybody's getting paid, between $200 on the low end, to $1,000, $1,500 a day, depending on what you're doing and what positions you're in. And so there's a financial cost, a lot higher of a financial cost to those mistakes when you're talking about the pros, the big leagues, right? And so even outside of Hollywood, if you decided to do production in Dallas, or if you decided to do production in San Antonio, I'm just naming towns that I know in Texas because I'm from Texas, but fill in the blank for you. There is still a cost to making those mistakes, and it may not be at the scale of what it would be in California, but it is still pretty costly for those mistakes. So why not do that in an environment that fosters those mistakes and encourages you to have some creativity in that too. So I think my next point is kind of the make or break, I think, for anybody heading into college, heading into film school, or even curious about film school. And it's all about the mindset, right? So it's not necessarily about the classes that you attend, even though you're going to be learning stuff, or you're supposed to be learning stuff, right? It's not about, it's not necessarily, it all adds up, right? As far as the classwork goes and your professors and the stuff that they try to teach you. But the most important thing is that you're getting that practical experience. And so one of the things that separated the University of North Texas from other schools that I applied to was a TV station called North Texas Television, NTTV, right? And so I have bittersweet memories, some good, some bad, of working at that TV station, student-ran TV station, where there was one staff, Phyllis, who's still awesome. I try to stay in contact with her when I can. And then there were 6 students who were paid part-time to work at that station. And so I was one of the 6 students at the time. I don't know if the numbers are any different today, but essentially we got to do lots of different projects ranging from news to live sports to live talk shows, pre-recorded stuff. And then we also did really cool stuff where we essentially created our own shows. And so we started the first semester. I worked on a music show where I directed a bunch of different music bands that we shot. UNT actually was a big school for music too. So we got to go exploring and shoot documentaries and shoot bands, which was really cool because I have a music background too. So that was really fun. And then the second semester, I was working with 6 other students who were interested in and willing to put in the time and effort to create shows, right? And so we called that training ground. And so we actually created 6 different individual shows, from drama, scripted drama, to kind of horror, weird, dark comedy type stuff, to sketch comedy, and UNT Cribs, which was a total ripoff of MTV Cribs, right? MTV Cribs. So anyways, there's a Spanish show. So there's just a wide gamut of things we got to do. And then my final semester there, we got to do actually 12 different shows. So it just kept multiplying and growing. And I was really lucky to be a part of that and have the experience of working on different shows and communicating and working with different teams. So I'll probably eventually do a video one day about my experience at college and some of those things. But if you're considering film school, if you're going to go to college for filmmaking, that would be my biggest encouragement, is that you find something that you can practice your craft. And classes will give you that a little bit, but if you're the kind of student who can go above and beyond and spend the extra time and extra efforts in that, you're gonna excel, right? And you're gonna kind of surpass your peers. You're gonna pass them because you're spending that extra time and effort, and you have that extra commitment. And so that's really what it comes down to. There's a book that I just read probably a month and a half ago or so, called The Compound Effect. And so that book talks about essentially those little margins, those little differences, which actually make up in the long term as big sequential. Yeah, that's the right word, right? They have long-term benefits, right? Those little decisions add up over time. And so that's what it comes down to. So if you're considering film school, your costs are going to be drastically different than mine, right? I went to school 10 years ago, 7 years ago, somewhere in that ballpark. And so the costs today are going to be different, right? I also, like I said, I worked in college for the university television station. I worked as a RA, a resident assistant, which I would also encourage you to pursue if you're in college. That was an excellent program for me. And I also was fairly smart about money and finances and that kind of stuff. I didn't have any sort of like scholarship or funding or anything like that. My parents had 5 kids and were middle class and didn't really plan too much for college education for us as far as finances go, even though both my parents strongly encouraged us going to college, right? So I walked out of school with $24,000 of debt. And I'm happy to say 7 years later, paid it off in about 6 years, right? So, yeah, it's costly, right? And that's everybody's big gripe. And a lot of people are afraid to take that money out and have a loan against them. But the reality is, if you compare the kind of job that I have now and what I do now to what I would have been doing if I didn't pursue college and if I didn't take the 3 years and the $24,000 out, if you compare what I'm making now to what it would have been, it's a pretty drastic difference, especially considering I probably would have stayed in Texas and probably my hometown, and the volume of work in Texas compared to California is just drastically different. That's one thing I've talked about before on my YouTube channel. Essentially, in Los Angeles, in Hollywood, there's a list, like union lists of different shows, and so I've heard and I've been told by different people, like There could be 75, there could be 100, there could be 200 different union productions, right, with a full staff, with a full crew of 80 to 150 people working on different shows. And so that's thousands, tens of thousands of people that are working in the film industry. And that's just the vastness of Hollywood and why they are the entertainment capital of the world, right? And so I've still done projects in Dallas. I've done projects in San Antonio. But generally they are kind of few and far between. They're not something that is going to happen every week or every month necessarily. It might happen once or twice a year. So yeah, that's sort of kind of the bigger differences. And so I also will caveat everything I'm saying. I know I'm being very pro school right now. But I think that maturing process, like I said in the beginning of this video, when you're really young, 18 to 24, you got to kind of mature and grow up a little bit. And so some people are naturally more mature than others. Some people might be starting college a little later. That's totally cool. Everybody's life's a little different, right? But say you are one of those people, I don't think college is a requirement to be successful in the film industry, right? That's another bottom line. I would say there are tons of people in college. Tons of people in the film industry that didn't go to college. And so I hate to do this, but when I compare myself to people who haven't gotten school experience, right, and they only have practical experience, there are strengths and weaknesses. And so I think the number one thing that separates somebody who went to film school, generally speaking, to somebody who didn't, I guess the number one thing would be when you go to college, you're supposed to get this rounded education, right? You have core classes, you study history, you study English, you study all those things. And so it's supposed to generally make you a smarter person, right? You're supposed to be more well-rounded, and that degree is supposed to allow you to think at a higher level, right? That's what college is. And so you can educate yourself. You can push yourself. There are tons of great resources out there now. There's tons of great videos. There's tons of ways for you to up your game and to learn and to grow. And so I've always called myself a lifelong learner. And so I want to be perpetually growing and learning and gaining more skills. And so that's never going to end for me. And so going to traditional film school isn't the only way to grow, right? It's not the only way to learn. And so that's one kind of caveat that I would throw in there about film school and that kind of thing. So if you moved out to California and you wanted to make it happen, I'm not saying it's going to work against you not going to film school, but you're going to know better than I, right, about what your strengths and weaknesses are, and maybe you need that little bit of extra time practicing your craft before you jump in. Now, on the other end of that as well, like I said earlier, I felt like I learned more in the first 3 months on set than I did the whole time in school. But the realization now is that it wasn't about the filmmaking I was learning. It was about everything else, the networking, the core classes, the mindset stuff, and just being able to allow my mind to practice my craft and practice adulting, so to speak. I think that's what really made film school worth it. It wasn't necessarily like the education of learning how a camera works and how those kind of things work. Like that's not the goal. At least it wasn't for me. And looking back, 2020, right? 2020 is hindsight. Hindsight is 2020. Looking back in time, right? I may have thought it was about getting those fundamentals down and learning about the filmmaking craft, but the reality is the other things that circulated, that surrounded film school, were the things that actually made it worth it. And so that's kind of my 2 cents. I know there are different people with different attitudes towards school, towards college, towards film school. So I would encourage you in that, and just kind of think through some of these points. Maybe you have some thoughts. If you're on Facebook, hit me up. If you haven't heard from me in a while, it's starting back up again. It's Hacking Hollywood. It's the channel that's dedicated to learning from Hollywood and applying that knowledge to yourself as an individual, as filmmakers. And so, YouTube is kind of where everything's grounded in, but I'm trying to integrate more Facebook things and other platforms as well to try not to be only in one spot, right? Don't put all your eggs in one basket, so to speak. So Yeah, I think that's it, man. I'm trying to think if there are any other cons to film school. Oh yes, the numbers. So, $24,000. That's a pretty easy number to do some math on, right? So, if you take my projected long-term money making, right? So, and we say I'm going to work 30 years, right? So 30 years, and I just went to school. It cost me $24,000, right? So if I work for 30 years, that means it costs me, I have to pay back $1,000 a year, roughly. It's less than that, right? But for easy number's sake, let's say it's $1,000 a year that I have to repay. The question is, do I think I am worth $1,000 more every year because of my film degree, because of the college degree that I have? I would say yes. And I would say, if I did a quick Google search right now, which I'm not going to get into because I might see that I'm wrong, but I would assume, or I would guess, that the average person with a college degree makes more than $1,000 a year more than somebody who doesn't have a college degree. And so as far as like specifically with the entertainment industry, if you're going to be an AD or DP or whatever, like there isn't really that difference like monetarily between having a degree and not having a degree. But again, going back to the whole mindset thing of like you being a better, more rounded person that has spent this extra time to elevate yourself, that's going to be huge too. Another interesting caveat though is I think it was 80% of film school grads. I forget where I should have a source for this, but I don't. But I've heard somewhere along the line, 80% of film school grads actually don't end up in the entertainment business. And the question is, obviously, why is that? Like, why do so many people go to film school and then not actually practice filmmaking as a career? I think the number one reason is they don't really realize the commitment that it takes to do filmmaking, right? It's a fun thing. It's something that you do with your friends, and people get to dream big and have these great aspirations for being filmmakers and directors and that kind of stuff, right? But when reality sets in, when they spend the time and the effort to learn and grow as a filmmaker, they realize it's a lot of work, right? And so if you've done any sort of video production before, you know exactly what I'm talking about. When you first start off in the business, you're like, oh, this is going to be fun. This is going to be easy. This is going to be great. But then you realize that you have to do this for a living, right? And so the filmmaking process, honestly, is not always an easy thing. There are times where it's a pain in the butt, and you have to work really hard and put in extra hours. If you haven't heard me say this already, the average day on set in Hollywood is like 14 to 18 hours, right? So if you think of your normal 9 to 5, you're working 8-9 hours, no big deal, right? It's always funny to me. I go to church. I have a small group. I attend church, right? I should say I go to church services, and we have a small group that meets at my house every Sunday. And it's interesting to hear people with different backgrounds and, different jobs and whatnot. And nobody else is in the film industry but me. And it's interesting to hear when somebody kind of complains about a 10-hour day, right? A 9-hour day that they stayed in for overtime. And I keep my mouth shut as long as I can, as much as I can. But I've been on those days where you're working 20, 22, 24 hours. I do have a story about a 36-hour day that I worked. Yes, straight 36 hours. It's a whole nother thing. I'll have to put a video up on that one eventually, but that was pretty crazy. So let me try to get back to what I was saying too. Let me see. I got one more note in here. Yes. So, all right, confession. Even though I have been telling you this whole video that I think film school is worth it, that I think your time and money is well spent having a college degree, here's my catch-22. My current resume does not include my college degree. It's pretty crazy, right? Here it is actually right in the background. I just noticed it. I spent 3 years, summers, and $24,000, right? For this degree that is not even listed on my resume. And the reason for that is it's not about the degree, it's about the experience. And so now that I'm 7 years into the business, now that I have several hundreds of projects under my belt, the degree is a little less weighted than everything else. But again, going back to the same thing I've said 6 times now, it's not necessarily about that plaque that's on my wall, right? It's about the experience and the practice that you got during filmmaking. So, sorry, during college. So let me see. I'm going to jump on here and see. It doesn't look like anybody's commenting. That's pretty normal for my channel. Oh, Ray says YNO Melly. I don't know what that means, Ray. What do you mean, buddy? He's throwing me some finger signs. I don't know what they mean. But hey, I have a small YouTube channel, like I said before. Feel free to leave me any comments on Facebook Live, or if you're on YouTube, feel free to leave me comments. Ask me anything about the film industry, and I will try my best to answer. Like I said before, I've been working in Hollywood for about 7 years on various productions. I just realized today marks my 7-year anniversary in California. I believe August 20th of 2012 was when I got to California 7 years ago, and it's been a fun journey so far. So I started in commercial production, and I did PA work on commercial projects like infomercials, commercials, obviously the stuff you would see between real events. And I got a comment here. It says, he locked up, he need to be free. My parents begged me to get a business degree as a minor. I wish I had. Colin, what's up, dude? Yeah, Colin, he's messaged me on Facebook. He said that he wished he also got a business degree too. Yes. I'm trying to see if I know you, Colin. I think Mark's our mutual friend. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that was definitely something I wish I did do. Was get that business minor, at least, if not a business major. Hey, Mark, how you doing, dude? Thanks for watching. We should all be sleeping right now. I don't know why we're up, because we're crazy. But what was I saying before? My ADD is getting the better of me. It's all good. Any more good comments? Oh, yeah. Now I remember. So I was talking about the channel. Yeah, so I've been out in California 7 years, commercial production. Then I was able to migrate over to television and film. So that's primarily been my background is TV shows. And so I've probably worked on about 25 different shows, ranging from, Bones to Castle, Modern Family, The Goldbergs, Westworld, Silicon Valley. So it's been fun to be a part of those projects, and it's really fun to share those projects with people who are kind of outside the industry, because they kind of light up and they're like, oh, have you seen so-and-so and worked with so-and-so? It's like, yeah. It's been fun to meet people and like conversate with people. And so like, I guess that's a little bit of bragging rights. I guess you can say that's pretty fun to think about working with celebrities or whatnot. But the reality is, at the end of the day, these are all people, right? These are all guys who have families or girls who have families and friends, and they have a schedule to keep, and they have a job to do, and I have a job to do, right? And so when we're on set, that's kind of the mindset thing too, is you want to, be cordial and tell them you might tell them that you're a fan, right? But ultimately you still have a job to do. And so sometimes it's coordinating with the talent to tell them, hey, you got 5 minutes, or we don't need you in the next shot, or whatever. And other times, like, your responsibilities have nothing to do with the first team or the talent. And so it's better to not push your luck and talk to somebody unless they come to you. That's kind of been my general rule of thumb. So, all right, y'all. I'm going to sign off for tonight. Thanks for hanging out with me. Hope you learned something. If you have any comments, please hit me up, and I would love to cover what we're saying. So the bottom line, I should have opened with this: was film school worth the $24,000 and the 3 years of my life? I would say yes, it was. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you on the next